The Story of the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799. The French Revolution, which began in 1789 and ended with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte in the late 1790s, was a defining moment in European history. It was a period when ordinary French citizens completely transformed their nation's political system, abolishing centuries-old institutions such as absolute monarchy and feudalism. Causes of the French Revolution. 1. Social causes. By the late 18th century, French society was deeply unequal and exploitative. It was divided into three estates. First estate, the clergy. Second estate, the nobility. Third estate, the common people, peasants, workers, and the middle class. The first and second estates enjoyed vast privileges and were exempt from paying taxes, while the third estate, representing the majority of the population, carried the heavy tax burden and had no political or social rights. 2. Economic causes. Years of warfare, especially France's involvement in the American War of Independence, had drained the royal treasury. King Louis XVI's government faced a severe financial crisis, worsened by an unfair tax system that exempted the wealthy. The burden fell on the impoverished Third Estate, already struggling with rising food prices and widespread poverty. 3. Political causes. King Louis XVI was an indecisive and extravagant ruler, oblivious to the suffering of his people. His lavish spending and failure to address the country's problems fueled public anger. 4. Intellectual and philosophical causes. Enlightenment thinkers like Rousseau challenged the divine right of kings and the legitimacy of absolute rule. Their ideas promoting equality, democracy, and the sovereignty of the people inspired the masses to question the old regime. The outbreak and progress of the revolution. In 1786, King Louis XVI's finance minister, Charles Alexander de Calonne, proposed reforms, including a land tax that would apply to all estates. To seek support, the king called a meeting of the Estates General in 1789, the first time since 1614. The Estates General comprised representatives from all three estates, but voting was conducted by estate rather than by head. This meant the first and second estates could outvote the third estate, despite the third representing 98% of the population. When their demands were ignored, the Third Estate declared themselves the National Assembly on June 17, 1789. After being locked out of their meeting hall by royal officials, they gathered in a nearby tennis court and took the famous tennis court oath, pledging not to disband until a new constitution was formed. Some liberal clergy and nobles soon joined them. On July 14, 1789, the people of Paris stormed the Bastille prison, seeking gunpowder and weapons. This event became a symbol of the revolution and is still celebrated as Bastille Day, France's national holiday. The revolution spread to the countryside where peasants attacked tax collectors and landlords. In August of 1789, the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, inspired by Enlightenment ideals. It proclaimed principles of equality, free speech, and popular sovereignty. The constitutional monarchy and further crisis. By 1791, a new constitution had been created, establishing a constitutional monarchy that limited the king's powers and placed him under an elected legislative body. Citizens were granted civil rights, though voting was restricted to property-owning men who paid a certain amount of tax. Between 1791 and 1792, the new Legislative Assembly faced intense internal strife as royalists and revolutionaries clashed. The privileged First and Second Estates, having lost their former status, conspired to restore the old regime, deepening the national crisis.
Rise of the National Convention and the execution of the king. Fearing the spread of revolution, neighboring monarchies like Austria and Prussia formed an alliance in 1792 to restore the French monarchy. In April that year, France went to war. Initially, it suffered major defeats, demoralizing the public. Amidst the chaos, the Legislative Assembly was dissolved, and a new government, the National Convention, was established in September 1792. Its primary aim was to defend the revolution from internal and external enemies. The convention declared France a republic, abolishing the monarchy. The convention was dominated by radicals, particularly the Jacobins, who sought sweeping changes to society. They believed the monarchy should be completely eradicated. When King Louis XVI tried to flee to Austria, he was arrested and charged with treason. In December 1792, he was tried, found guilty of conspiring against the revolution, and sentenced to death by guillotine. He was executed in January 1793, and his wife, Marie Antoinette, met the same fate 9 months later. The Reign of Terror, 1793 to 1794. Within the convention, two major factions emerged, the Girondins and the radical Jacobins. The Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, soon gained full control. Robespierre implemented radical reforms aimed at redistributing aristocratic wealth, confiscating church lands, and abolishing slavery. While these policies aimed to help the poor, Robespierre enforced them through brutal means. Anyone seen opposing the Jacobins or the revolution was labeled an enemy and executed by guillotine. Between 1793 and 1794, approximately 16,000 people were executed during this reign of terror. Eventually, public sentiment turned against Robespierre. In July 1794, he was arrested and guillotined. The Jacobin dominance ended. The Directory and the rise of Napoleon. In 1795, the National Convention introduced a new republican constitution, limiting voting rights to the wealthy middle class. An executive body of 5 members called the Directory was formed to govern France. The aim was to prevent the concentration of power that had enabled Robespierre's tyranny. Despite checks and balances, the Directory became corrupt and inefficient, losing popular support. People longed for a strong and stable government. During this period, Napoleon Bonaparte, a charismatic military general, rose to prominence. He crushed internal revolts and defeated foreign powers like Austria, Russia, and Britain, which were trying to restore the monarchy. Napoleon's military victories made him immensely popular. In 1799, he led a coup against the Directory and established the consulate, with himself as first consul, effectively becoming a dictator. In 1804, after a public referendum, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of France, ending the revolution and restoring monarchy, this time under his rule. Significance of the French Revolution. Despite its flaws and eventual return to monarchy, the French Revolution is regarded as a watershed moment in modern history. It introduced powerful new ideas rooted in liberalism, enlightenment, and democracy. The French armies, fighting to defend the Republic, spread revolutionary ideals across Europe. These ideas sparked waves of revolutionary fervor in other countries, encouraging people to challenge their monarchs. Although many uprisings were violently suppressed, they continued into the early 19th century, ultimately leading to the decline of absolute monarchies in Europe. The French Revolution ended feudalism and laid the groundwork for future progress in individual liberties and democratic governance.